Here is your clicker.
Thank you. Thank you very much. God, what a picture. So it's fabulous. Unfortunately, I can't see you, but it's really great to be back in Riga. I was here last year, and I had the opportunity to go through the city this morning, and it's just lovely this time of the year. As I said, it's almost winter, and I'm here to talk to you this time about this huge transformation that we're seeing right now, this huge transformation we're undergoing as a civilization from sort of an old world with rules that we used to know to a new world with rules that haven't been exactly established yet. But there is one thing, with all of these exponential changes and everything really moving so fast, there's one thing that's really not moving very fast, at least not fast enough for my taste, and that is when it comes to diversity. A little bit reflected in this picture here, and I want to briefly touch on that. So here's a statistic that, if you could just move to the next slide. Here's a statistic from the US, but it's the same statistic in Germany, where, you know, if you look at all the CEOs that are named John, there are more of them than all female CEOs together. In Germany, that's Michael and Thomas, and I think it's better here in Latvia, really. I've read up a little bit, but still, I think overall we can see that we do not have very diverse business managements. Here is a statistic that I just saw from a report that was published a few days ago, Albright report. And over 60 of the largest 160 companies in Germany have this official goal in their annual report to have 0% women in their executive boards by 2020. I mean, I thought, is this serious? So I started looking it up, and I went into some of these individual annual reports, and it's true. Zalando, you know, totally dependent on women. 0 women in the management board. I find that flabbergasting. So in a world, you don't really have to be surprised that when you sit in boardrooms that they do look a little bit pale, male and stale. And if you take a look at Wall Street, for example, it looks like that. Although today I think it looks a little bit like a mix of robots and men, so it's probably a little bit outdated. But what concerns me the most, and that reflects a lot of what we've just heard in the previous speech, is this picture, Silicon Valley, which represents sort of the tech community. And I think in this day and age where we're moving towards the age of artificial intelligence, where our future in a way gets coded, where the framework is being set, the morals, the ethics, we have no diversity practically. And that gets reflected in newspaper, magazine articles as follows. And if you could just move, this thing doesn't work here. If you could just go to the next slide, where you do have sort of a lot of newspaper articles stating that there is no equilibrium and that we really need to do something about this. We saw this percentage of 90% male. I think the AI workforce is 87.5% male. And again, you know, I have nothing against males at all. I'm married to one, I have wonderful sons. I just think if we code our future, if so much depends on technology, we need to be represented when we talk about the moral frameworks, when we talk about all the frameworks, and when we take a look at how we want to shape our future. Here is a test done by an African-American researcher to see how well these machines really recognize faces. And the faces were recognized when they were white, and they were barely recognized when they were non-white. She had to wear a white mask to be even recognized within her own test. And I know when you go and you use soap dispensers, for example, they have been coded in a way or trained with data in a way that the AI cannot recognize anything but relatively white hands. So if you have a darker skin, you know, you're out of luck. There is no soap for you. So I have a totally different vision for when it comes to the future, and I think it needs to look very different. What we do have, however, and this is also almost funny, but it's not, when you Google the word vision, which is often reflected, you know, vision leadership, that's what you get. You usually get a man on a mountain that looks either east or looks west or looks, up straight. And that's sort of the perception that we have in our own minds when it comes to leadership, when it comes to vision, which is of course totally ridiculous. There are lots of kids with great visions. There are lots of people that look differently that have great visions. And we need those today in this really exciting world where everything is changing at unprecedented speed. If we could just move to the next slide again, please. And you can see hockey stick type of exponential changes just about anywhere. To the left, you can see demographics, the world population. In 1800, we had 1 billion people. Now we have 7.5. Mid-century, 9 to 10. And at the end of the century, 13 billion people. And we cannot continue to live the way we do with 13 billion people. Right now, we're using 1.5 times the resources the Earth has available for us. Forecast is in the next 15 years, that's going to be twice. But the problem is we don't have 2 Earths available to us. We only have 1. We need to do things very differently, and we need to use technology in order to get some efficiencies and really change the way we do stuff. We've heard it before, data is exploding, and there are lots of different statistics, but one thing is for sure, data is doubling in general every year. In the medical space, I've read that it's doubling every 73 days. Just think about that. It's really, really hard to imagine. Everything is equipped with chips and sensors. Business models look very different, and they can grow very fast. If you take a look at Uber, it took them 5 years for the first 1 billion passengers, and it took them 6 months for the next 1 billion. That's exponential growth. Life and work are changing exponentially, and nothing remains the same. And industries that don't recognize them, that will just simply not be around. The music industry at first, when streaming services, or with Napster at first, and then streaming services came along, they spent their time in court fighting those new technologies rather than thinking, how can I reinvent myself? And nowadays, nobody buys CDs anymore. That is out, Everything is totally different. The car industry, and I'm from Germany, and I've sort of watched that, was very reluctant to change, very, very reluctant to accept that autonomous driving is on the horizon, e-mobility, and now everybody's struggling really to make up for lost time. Business as usual is definitely dead. You can't continue the way you have in the past. If you can move ahead, please. So, can you just, thank you. So if this is true, and you take a look at the fact that we have moved from a world where products were at the center of the value chain to one where platforms and services are the center at the value chain, that's very, very different. Now it's the data and the services rendered by the products that are important. Again, you've seen that with services like Netflix. The Apple iPhone really was a platform. I worked for Compaq, and in '98 we had a wonderful smartphone ready to go. We introduced it at Telco '98, but we didn't have the platforms to go with it. And platforms in and by themselves can change very quickly. If you take a look at Airbnb, people would say, oh yeah, sure, it's all about hotel rooms or the alternative to staying in hotels. But that's really moving on. Airbnb is now an experience site, and people go on and sell their experiences on Airbnb, and soon it's going to be probably the largest job site. So this is how this stuff is moving, and again, it's moving very, very fast. If you help me with the slides, it just doesn't do it here with a clicker. So we're in the age of artificial intelligence, and we've heard before that there is a distinction between the narrow intelligence that we see today and the general intelligence that might or might never come. I mean, the experts have visions and ideas that are very, very different. Some talk about the end of the world or the next world war. Some say, no, we can use that and really help tackle some of the biggest issues in the world. So we don't know really exactly what's next, but I would say we know enough to say we gotta start getting involved because it's huge, and I don't want to leave it to the few people that right now are sort of putting the code, the frameworks, and the ethics around this. Narrow artificial intelligence, all of that stuff isn't new. It's been around for quite some time, but now we have the computing capacity, which is very cheap, and we have the data, and all of that together makes it mainstream, and that's why you see a lot of prediction and facial recognitions or autonomous driving. And these machines or these AI are very good at one thing. In case of the Go player, it plays Go. In case of the autonomous car, it drives that car probably much more safely than a person ever will once we get everything sort of worked out. So it doesn't mirror human intelligence just yet, because the female surgeon can operate open heart surgery, and she can also drive the car, do a lot of different things. We're not there yet, but things are moving very, very fast. If you could just go to the next slide. There we can see that we're now in a position to do very accurate predictions. Could you just move on, please? Very accurate predictions with models like this here on the left-hand side, where you take real-time data, crowdsourced data, and you can get on-the-spot information how to get most quickly from place A to place B. You can, as you read newspaper articles, you can guarantee that the sports sections aren't written by people anymore, they're written by AIs. We've seen facial recognition, what works and what doesn't, but we know already on Baidu you can upload like the picture of a dog, it'll find similar images, and the AI can even distinguish between blueberry muffins and the Chihuahua on the left-hand side. It's not that easy to do, but it can. And it's getting more creative as well. This is a picture that was sold at Christie's for $432,000 not too long ago, and the AI was trained with about 15,000 paintings. So the job market out there looks nothing like the job market we used to know, and job is not a place anymore. A lot is very agile, very fluid. When we don't know how to do things, we can easily turn to the crowd on many, many platforms. I've done a project at HP where we worked with a Harvard medical school, and just by turning to the crowd for a specific problem, we could accelerate the whole process by a factor of 1,000 within a week. We didn't know how to do it ourselves, so that's a very different way of working. Everything is much more project-based, not so much long-term. A lot of companies hire you based on your skill and your motivation rather than just the degree that you have. We have read a lot of studies on the robots that are going to replace half of our jobs. I think there's going to be a lot of changes to those jobs. There's going to be a lot of augmentation, and we have to be ready for that. But most important, I think, most of the jobs that we're going to have don't exist today, and they don't necessarily get handed to us or to our children. They will be the ones that will be creating these jobs. But with the means that we have in our hands, we can be pretty sure that whatever can be done will be done. And the question is, what role do we want to play? And I, for myself, have decided I want to have a word in there. I want to have a say, and I want to understand what's going on. And I don't want to leave, my destiny and that of my family and that of my community to people I don't know and I don't necessarily, at this stage, trust. So the question is, as an individual, if you say today, look, I find this fascinating, I just don't know what to do about it. I think there are some ways to get started. First of all, I think spending time on understanding these business models and these technologies is not a nice to have, it's a must have. And anybody needs to work it in their daily schedule, into their weekly schedule, to look at ways to better understand what's happening around us. And I'm going to show you some sites which I think will help you do that. I think this investment is not only for yourself. If you're a leader of a team, you have to think about the entire team and think about, basically the entire company. How can we move from where we are today to where we need to be? And, how do I facilitate this? And at the end of the day, when we talk a lot about these technologies and how we're all going to be out of work. I think as long as we have so many problems out there and the world is facing humongous challenges, we're not going to be out of work. We just have to find ways to use these technologies to address some of these big social and societal issues. So if you could just move to the next. Here are some organizations that I think are worth paying attention to because they can bring you a little bit closer to the discussions around AI. Some will help you find out more details and where to even train yourself. Others will tell you ways of how AI could be deployed. Another one will take a look at the ethics and the morals and will enable you to also speak up and have your voice heard. So I think there's a great way to get started in this game. I also think, as you look at the future for yourself, for your children, is to take a look at what is it that the robots or that AI doesn't do very well, and how can I really train myself and think differently to really bring together maybe totally new partnerships to solve some of the critical problems, identify them, and take a look at who could potentially contribute what between man and machine to address that, get creative around there. And I think this human interface is becoming even more important in the future. Philosophy, morals, ethics, human behavior, human connections in this day and age. And technology should always be in the background and the enabler, just like electricity. So, in a way, I really look at it as an augmentation. Technology can do a lot, but it can only do it when we can only achieve bigger things and bigger goals if we learn more about these machines. What does it mean that the machine can recognize patterns and learn itself? How can I work with such a machine? How could the machine even help me so that I can bring what I do well and what the machine does well? There are some tests and some studies in the US, and I've seen some teams that are doing that already, and I think the earlier you think along those lines and you try that out, the better. As a leader, I think the most important role now is to be this sort of change agent, to take the fear from people, to make them curious, to take them along on a journey that nobody knows exactly where it's going to go, but where we know that we really need to be on the train to help determine where this train is going to go. So the change agent, create that type of open mindset and show people that this is a glass half full. I mean, we've never had these type of opportunities in all our lives. We've never had access to so much information, to so much knowledge. And we've never been able to really use that to, again, tackle some of the challenges around us. But it looks very different from sort of the leadership styles that got you very successful in the past. And again, to my point earlier, I want to just show a few cases where I think technology is being used to tackle some of these big issues, these big societal issues, and give some examples, because I think we all could replicate these quite easily. So, the first one is about energy efficiency. So if we can just move to the next slide, please. I don't know why it's stuck all the time. A good starting point is just the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, to see what is it that the world needs to achieve? What do we need to do in order to really live in a better world? And there are issues in medicine, there are issues about food, there are water, resources, and the environment. So if we take a look at the environment, and we can just go to the next slide, please. Here's a great improvement that Google has made with DeepMind. They purchased DeepMind a few years ago, and they've used this artificial intelligence to reduce the energy consumptions of the cooling units in their data centers by 40%, 40. And overall, that was an increase in energy efficiency by 15%. That's huge. That's absolutely humongous when it comes to cost savings, but also to savings to the environment, CO2 emissions. Or here's a forecasting tool that shows on the left, it's a traditional forecasting tool for how you predict floods. It's just one example. You could use many different examples that are similar. On the right-hand side, you can see how you can be much more precise. And that's important because 250 million people out there really are in flooding areas and need to know ahead of time what's coming in order to really move to safety. Next slide, please. Here is an area where we all can contribute as well. I was just in Costa Rica here, and we were working with Conservation International to apply photo technology, photo sensors, data sensors to the tropical rainforests. The tropical rainforests are absolutely critical for all of us, because as we sit here in Latvia and we take a deep breath, 40% of that oxygen comes straight from the tropical rainforests. A quarter of all of our medicines come from there, and it hosts half of this Earth's animals and plants. So extremely important. And what we do get then, next slide, are pictures from animals. They look a little bit like selfies, where you then see where are these animals, are they declining, are they inclining? And we get massive amount of data because we do that all around the world. And with artificial intelligence and big data analytics, we were able to reduce this analytical part from like half a year to practically 1 hour. So the researchers can now spend their time on really doing something about the important findings. Or here I was quite impressed with Latvia's air text service, which I understood had some hiccups at first, but what a great service at the hand of everybody. Everybody has this available to themselves to see about the pollen and the quality of the air for today and the next few days. I mean, that's fantastic, and that's very important to many people that have specific medical conditions. So a great way to improve people's lives. Next slide, please. One of the areas that also gets transformed radically is precision farming, where you can now do irrigation based on artificial intelligence just to the places where you need to irrigate, which is very important because we have a scarcity of water, or where you can distinguish between weeds and crops and just spray on the weeds to make sure that you don't get a resistance there. So phenomenal savings in the US alone, $43 billion just with that technology. And the next slide, please. Can you move to the next, please? I think we'll hear a lot today in the next few days about medicine, and I think the big improvement we're going to see with AI is to make, as contradictory as it sounds, make it more human again, because the system is totally overloaded. Doctors don't have any time for their patients. They barely have time to do the right type of analytics. Most systems are totally overloaded. And by freeing that time with very precise analytics where they can do, we've heard it before from Jamie, you know, whether it's tumors or whether it's x-rays, that they can do precision analysis is absolutely phenomenal. And it gives doctors more time with their patients. In the US, for example, the third highest cause for death is medical error. And a lot of it is due to the fact that there is just a system overload. Robot dogs, we know there are some of these that have taken the medical exam and have scored higher than the students. We've heard that before. In China, very important because a lot of the doctors see more than 200 patients every day. And so they can help with the pre-testing and also with the post-care. And we can go to the next. I thought that was a fantastic example from Latvia again to show how you can use technology to make learning more immersive and to make it easier, and a great example. And so you could use that or many, many others to show that by making things easier, you're really providing a benefit and a service to society. My last example is this mobile app from RefUnite, where they have gone into refugee camps, and you have to think that there are right now about 68.5 million people that have been forcibly displaced, a lot of them in refugee camps. They go into the camps, and the refugees get to train the AIs. They don't only get $1.25, which they usually do for tasks at hand. They get $20 every day. They learn the system. They learn and get trained on a digital system. It's the beginning of a new life for them. So again, AI for a good cause. So my final points then are, you know, there's lots you could do. You could really get lost in all of that. I mean, you could see there's so much information. There is so much new technology. This person says something, the other person says something else. What should you do, and how can you continuously learn in this world? And if there's one website that you should memorize coming out of here today, if you don't know it yet, it's the one in the middle. It's Do It Yourself Genius. They have looked at all of these other websites, so Coursera, Udemy, edX, which are all websites that will enable you to learn at your own rate with the best quality education that anybody can get. And they describe exactly what it is you do for, which cause. So very, very important, and I can only recommend, all of these sites have really democratized access to education. So I said up front on the slide, what got us here won't get us to the next stage. It's not even going to keep us here, let alone, take us to where we want to go. I think in the past, a lot of people would tell us, do what you are really good at and do a lot more of it and really be the best at what you can be. And I think in this day and age, this is one of the worst pieces of advice you can get. Because you have to branch out right and left. You have to understand some new technologies. You have to see where things are moving and not have this tunnel view. And in order to do so, I think what you need to do and really need to pay attention to is to make sure that you build a network of people that you don't know and that have nothing to do with you. Because oftentimes we have networks with friends and people and business associates that think like me. So if I want to have a new endeavor, a new plan, and I go to them for advice, I might as well be talking to myself. I don't get the type of advice I should be getting. So go and branch out, and this festival is a great opportunity to meet new people from politics, other industries, different countries, get new ideas, and then apply these new ideas and do it in a playful way. And I get a lot of questions from women oftentimes, and they say, look, they've told me to do that, but that's not authentic, that's not who I am. And I said, but who are you? Who were you when you were born? Who were you 3 years ago? Who are you today, and who do you want to become? There are always these fantastic learning processes, and if I have set my mind to become this leader of this company of 1,000 people, I cannot just stand here and say, look, but I'm too introvert, I cannot talk to them. It's part of my job. It's something I have to learn, and I can learn it. And sometimes I want to be more forceful, and sometimes I want to be more empathetic, and sometimes quicker and sometimes slower. It's different things for different situations. So this is really what we need to grow into as we move along. And again, to the same view, in the past they said, you've got to know the rules. And I think in the future, that won't do the trick. In the future, you are the one that has to make the rules. And you can you just move on? You have to make the rules. And that's very, very different. That's from being a little bit more passive and seeing what's happening to really, write the rules, define the rules, and then live the rules and make sure that you have a say in all of that. And if we do that all together, I think then, and if we could just go one more, if we do that all together, then when we think about vision in our heads, we're going to be thinking about very different people, young people and old people and people from different backgrounds, because that's what it takes with them together to develop this vision of what this world that's driven by technology should and must look like. And all of us need to have a voice in that and speak out a lot louder than we have in the past. So I hope that this festival gives us a lot of great ideas on how to do that, and I hope that you have a wonderful 3 days. Thank you very much.
Okay.